This is The Toss-Up, where we take a look at some of the topics facing the world of college sports and give a little bit of the history behind some of them. We're not trying to change your mind, we just want to dive deeper into the topics that keep you tuned in to the teams you love. As of today, over 520 NCAA Division I basketball players will be transferring schools next year. Over 100 of those transfers will be graduate transfers. To call it an epidemic at this point isn't absurd, but the issue has two sides. College athletics involve individuals, and this means it involves personalities. Every individual is different, and their needs are constantly changing. So if a student athlete sees his or her needs change, they should be offered the ability to change schools. And they are, but with restrictions. Prior to graduation, any athlete must sit out a year of eligibility in order to play at a new school. In addition to that, schools have the ability to restrict which school you want to transfer to. For example, back in 2014, Kansas State basketball player Leticia Romero wanted to transfer after Kansas State fired head coach Deb Peterson. Kansas State officials, however, refused to grant any of the 94 schools on Romero's list permission to contact her. This left her without any options, and this happens all the time. Programs can restrict where athletes go, while coaches can leave whenever and go wherever they please. With these restrictions, how do we as a society expect to handle broken promises? Does there need to be a change to transfer rules? Or will a change increase the amount of transfers we see to a level too large to handle? I'm Eddie Cotton, and alongside me is my panel. We have Tyler Sorg, IDS Little 500 beat reporter, Michael Tilka of the Crimson Quarry, and Auston Matricardi, IUSTV baseball beat reporter. Now, guys, do we need to see a change to transfer rules?
I really think that we do, because especially with that example that you that you talked about, where the coach left and a player wanted to leave, but the school wouldn't let her. I think that it's crazy. Because if a player is going to commit to spending 4 years at a school and they commit to a specific coach, when that coach leaves, they should be able to go. Because, it's a change in the circumstance. They're committing, saying, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to play for Coach Krzyzewski or something. And if all of a sudden he's not there anymore and you're playing in a new system for a new coach and it's a completely different culture, you should be able to leave if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, the school can choose to drop an athlete at any given time. College athletes are really given a series of one-year scholarships. And this is just a classic case of the NCAA loving to have all the power and the student athletes not really having any of it.
I think if you want to sort of keep it with that amateur stance of NCAA sports being that amateur level, I think you got to allow kids to leave and go where they please. I mean, it's not professional. They're kids, basically, and at the end of the day, and kids want to go where they want to go. You brought up the statistic earlier, 520 Division I men's basketball players transferred last year. That's 1 in 9 collegiate men's basketball players in Division I. 1 in 9. So this is affecting a much larger number of students than we expect it to, and if it's affecting this many students, I think there needs to be some sort of restructuring.
Now, you mentioned that number of students. Do you think if we were to offer up free range, free opportunity to transfer wherever you wanted without any restrictions, do you think the number of transfers would go up, and do you think that's a problem?
Oh, absolutely. But I don't find it to be much of a problem because, again, it's 520 different, unique students, and they all have their reasons for leaving. A coach gets fired, and they don't want to play for the new coach. They go to a school, and they have sort of an incident where, they just don't like what's going on at the school. There's a multitude of reasons why a student could transfer, and I think if you do get rid of the 1 year sit-out transfer rule, you're obviously going to see some spikes. But again, it's a case-by-case issue, and I think it just needs to be handled as such, and you can't do sort of a whole blanket approach to the problem.
Yeah, I think in most cases, the 1 year sit-out transfer rule really isn't unreasonable. If there was a player, say, that wanted to leave, you could have a player who would transfer schools every other year in theory, And I know that's not something that college basketball fans or really the institution of the NCAA would want to see. At the same time, there are so many restrictions on where athletes can transfer to that I think it really discourages students from getting out of situations that might not be in their best interest. But overall, I would say that rule is generally fair.
I think that there shouldn't be a whole lot of restrictions on the where they can transfer, like you were talking about, because I mean you see some guys, you see like Noah Spence, who was with Ohio State football. He got kicked off the Ohio State football team. He transferred down to Eastern Kentucky, and he just dominated everybody because he was at Eastern Kentucky, and they don't play the best of competition. He probably should have been playing SEC football or something like that, but he couldn't because of his individual situation and where he was allowed to transfer to. And you see that a lot in basketball too. You see guys transferring from IU to East Tennessee State or Rhode Island, and maybe they should be playing better competition, but they're not.
Now, another part of the whole situation that we have to bring up is coaches and how they're able to leave whenever they please, whenever they want, and go wherever they want. Should there be some sort of rule around coaches where if a coach leaves, the eligibility rule disappears?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that anyone's going to say is, well, I don't want to lose, an athletic director is going to say, I don't want to lose my whole team. Tom Crean fired during the NCAA tournament. If anyone can transfer, he could lose, Archie Miller, the incoming coach, could lose 10 players. And that's not something a program ever really wants to see. But at the same time, I think that maybe upperclassmen should be given that opportunity. Younger players maybe are the ones that would have to stay. But that's a really tricky situation to really have a good grasp on what the rule should be. But I think bringing up more conversation about this really at the institutional level would benefit college athletics as a whole.
And with that, I think that that's a great idea, have some kind of rule based around if a coach leaves, then, let the players transfer freely. But I think that, you might want to sanction it, let them say, oh, wait until the new coach comes in, meet the new coach, talk to the new coach, then you can make your decision or something of that manner. I think that, you should probably, it's smart to wait out the hiring process, see what the new culture is going to be like. And, it could be a situation where, like here at Indiana, we haven't had anybody transfer after Archie Miller's come in, so the players decided to stay.
Yeah, I just think back to the original question of should coaches have to do the same sit-out rule. I don't think there's been much of an issue with coaches leaving, sort of hopping from school to school and things like that. I just think that coaches should be held a little bit more accountable, sort of when it comes to their contracts and things like that. You saw it a few years ago with Steve Alford, signed a big extension with New Mexico State, and then right after he did that, he bailed for the UCLA job. And I think coaches should be held accountable more to their contracts, but if like in Tom Crean's situation, Tom Crean was fired, so he's released from that contract on the school's behalf, so he should be allowed to go wherever he goes. And again, it's sort of that case-by-case basis.
I think that you're right about that too, because there's a big difference between a coach leaving for a better job and a coach getting fired. Mm-hmm. And I think that might also play into the decision of players and whether or not the players should have to sit out a year too. If their coach leaves, and maybe it's a little bit of a different situation there.
Now, another facet of transferring is the ability for a university to restrict which school you transfer to and which school you're in communication with. Do you think schools should have the ability to, say, restrict staying in conference or restrict going to a rival, or do you think that's just unjustified?
I think that, it's great for the schools. It's great for, Indiana to be able to say, well, you can transfer, you just can't go to Purdue or something like that. Because, but I think that student athletes should have more rights. I'm a big supporter of that. So I think that the players should be able to go wherever they want. If, Devontae Green just decides all of a sudden, oh yeah, I'm going to transfer to Purdue. Obviously that wouldn't be good for the university, but I think that the fans should have to get over it because that's what he wants to do. It wouldn't be positive, but you should let him do it anyway.
Yeah, I think there's a really easy way to find a happy medium in this, and that is restrict what schools student athletes can go to if there's a conflict of interest. And by that, I mean if they're in your conference or if they're on your schedule in the duration that said student athlete would be on their roster. That way, you'll never have to see them, but like you said, if an Indiana basketball player wanted to transfer to like North Carolina. Well, they're likely going to be on the IU basketball schedule again in the near future, but I don't see IU playing Stanford anytime in the next few years, in the regular season at least. So I think that's very reasonable to where athletes could still end up at a school that would really help them grow and develop as players in a high-level program where they belong, but not really hurt the school they're leaving.
I just think that that's not the greatest situation for the student athletes because it's taking away opportunities from them. They're out here trying to get to the pros. They're trying to start a career, or they're at least trying to get an education if they want to go to, say, a North Carolina or a Duke because the education or whatever. But it's also taking away opportunities because those schools get a lot of exposure, and high-level schools play a lot of other high-level schools. So saying that you can't go to any of the other Big Ten teams, or you can't go to a non-conference opponent that we're going to play once a year, I just don't think that's very beneficial for the student athletes because it takes away from their opportunities.
Yeah, but at the same time, if we really want to see more student athletes' rights, you have to take baby steps. And going from the state where we're at right now, where, like you said, 94 schools on a restriction list, we're not going to go from a situation where there are restrictions like that to you can go wherever you want. So I think at least for the time being, I propose a very reasonable, happy medium.
All right, I agree with that.
Michael, any final thoughts?
Something that crossed my mind when you're going through the first time about talking about how student athletes shouldn't be able to go to a school where they could end up seeing their old school again. But a good example that crossed my mind was that Kevin Wilson recently fired, I guess not too recently, it's been a few months now, but his first game as Ohio State's offensive coordinator is against the Indiana Hoosiers. So how can you propose that a student athlete can't go to a school where they will end up playing their old school when a head coach, there's no problem with that?
Yeah, look, I didn't say the system was fair. I'm just trying to react to the world we're living in. So I think, if my solution was something that the NCAA ran with, that still wouldn't be right, that Kevin Wilson can go somewhere where he plays Indiana and they're restricting where athletes can go where they would play against Indiana. But in this world where the NCAA is omnipotent over every student athlete that they govern, I just don't think we're ever going to see a system that's fair, that treats student athletes and coaches the same.
Well, I think that's sort of what this platform and the show is all about, is sort of pushing the rights of the student athletes, because I think all semester we've sort of been on sort of the side of student athletes, and I think it's sort of important that we talk about these issues and not just sort of sit back and say, oh, NCAA's in charge, we can't do anything about it. So I think the more we talk about it, the more we bring it up to the public eye, I think the rights of the student athletes can further down the line.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with you, and changes don't happen overnight. So I think, we're all in agreement that we want to see more rights. I'm just of the opinion that, baby steps, like I keep saying.
Either way, I think it's clearly obvious it's worth the conversation. Maybe they'll be changed in the future, maybe they won't. But that does it for this week's show. Be sure to continue the discussion on our Twitter page at IUSTV Sports and on Facebook at IUSTV Sports. You can always give any suggestions for the show and ask any questions you might have. Toss it up. Find out if we'll catch it. Until next Sunday, be proud and cheer loud.